My parents withdrawed money from my trust fund to buy a car for my sister, thinking I didn't know. I got accepted into Columbia. I should have been crying happy tears, but I ended up crying for a completely different reason. The letter came on a Tuesday afternoon. Crisp white envelope, gold embossed seal. My hands shook as I slid it open, breath catching. The first word I saw, congratulations. My knees gave out. I sank onto the floor of my tiny off-campus apartment, Columbia's acceptance letter trembling in my hands. This was it. The dream Grandma Evelyn and I had spoken about every Sunday. The reason I'd skipped parties, worked 2 jobs, and stuck to a color-coded planner for 4 years. Right here, printed in black ink. I should have screamed. I should have cried happy tears. Instead, my chest tightened with something I couldn't name yet. I snapped a picture of the letter and texted Taylor. Me. I got in. Taylor. OMG, you're in. I'm grabbing champagne. You call your parents yet? Me. Just about to. I hesitated. It wasn't that Mom and Dad didn't care. They just had priorities. Vanessa's spring engagement party, for example. A beach house rental for the long weekend. Dad's new watch collection. Things that glittered louder than a daughter's GPA. Still, I dialed. Mom picked up. Claire. Oh, honey, that's wonderful. Her voice sounded thin, like she was pacing, distracted. I got into Columbia, I said, pressing the phone tighter to my ear. That's amazing, sweetheart. You've worked so hard. Silence. I cleared my throat. I'll need to access the trust fund for tuition soon. Maybe we can meet with the bank this week? Another pause. You know, your dad's been swamped. Let me check with him and we'll figure something out. Don't worry, okay? But I did worry. I called Dad next, straight to voicemail. 30 minutes later, he texted, "Proud of you. We'll call soon. Crazy day at the firm." I stared at the message. My stomach curled with disappointment. I wandered over to the bookshelf and pulled out the worn envelope I kept tucked between Grandma Evelyn's favorite cookbooks. Inside was a letter written in her steady cursive, given to me the day I turned 17. The paper was soft from overreading. Claire, education is the one thing they can't take from you. I built this fund because I believe in your mind, your drive, your fire. Use it boldly. Love always, Grandma Evelyn. I ran my finger over her signature and exhaled slowly. She'd come to the States with nothing, cleaned houses while studying at night, started a business from scratch. The fund she built wasn't just money. It was legacy, faith, a lifeline. I should have felt secure. Instead, I felt off. Why did my parents sound like they hadn't seen this coming? Why wasn't Dad already on the phone with the bank? Taylor called that evening, voice giddy. Are you still floating? I should be, I said, curling up on the futon. But something's weird. Weird like how? I hesitated. They're dodging the tuition talk. I don't know. It's probably nothing. You sure? She asked. You always trust your gut. I didn't answer, because my gut was doing somersaults. That night, I curled up with Grandma's letter under my pillow. Sleep came in fits. In the early morning haze, I had a dream so vivid I woke in a sweat. Grandma Evelyn stood by the kitchen stove, stirring soup like she used to, cinnamon in the air. She turned to me and said, clear as day, "You need to check the bank, Claire." They've already started. A brand new white BMW was parked in my parents' driveway, but I was the only one without anything to celebrate. The sun was high over New Haven when I pulled into my parents' cul-de-sac, and there it was, gleaming, spotless, obnoxiously expensive. The kind of car that didn't belong in a family that claimed to be tight on liquid assets. It practically winked at me from the driveway like a silent dare. I parked my 10-year-old Honda across the street and stared at the BMW, trying not to let it crawl under my skin. Maybe Dad had finally gotten his bonus. Maybe it was a rental. Maybe I was overthinking again. Emily opened the front door before I reached the porch. "Claire, you made it." Her diamond ring caught the sunlight like it had something to prove. I stepped inside, the familiar scent of Mom's rosemary roast wafting from the kitchen. Jordan greeted me with a wide grin, sleeves rolled up like he'd just stepped out of a men's magazine shoot. "Claire," he said, pulling me into a side hug. "Heard you got into Colombia. That's amazing." "Thanks," I said, "and congratulations on the engagement." "Oh my God," Emily squealed. "Wait till you see the Pinterest board I made for the venue ideas. Jordan says I have a gift for aesthetics." "I said she could be a creative director," he added, "once my startup takes off." "Startup?" I raised an eyebrow. Jordan chuckled. "Still in stealth mode, but it's going to be huge." I didn't ask for details. I doubted I'd get any. We sat down for lunch. Mom's signature roast, Dad's dry small talk, Emily's nonstop updates about the apartment in Chelsea. "The view is so worth the rent," she gushed, "and the concierge actually remembers my name." I bit into a lukewarm carrot and waited for the right moment. It came just after Emily started describing the venue for their engagement party, some vineyard in upstate New York that sounded like it charged by the breath. "So," I began casually, "I've been trying to follow up about the trust fund. Columbia's deposit deadline is coming up." Mom didn't even blink. "We're handling it, sweetheart." I frowned. "Okay, but can we meet with the bank?" "Your dad's been slammed at work," she said too quickly. "And you know how banks are, slow and bureaucratic." "Right," I said. My eyes drifted to Dad, who was focused very deliberately on slicing his roast. "Dad?" He looked up. "Like your mother said, we're handling it." The conversation shifted to cake tastings and calligraphy fonts, but I wasn't listening anymore. Later, Emily dragged me outside to show off the BMW. "It's not just about aesthetics," she said, running a manicured hand along the hood. "Jordan said I needed something safe for city driving." "Of course," I murmured. She clicked the key fob and the car chirped cheerfully. "He's so thoughtful. And Mom and Dad really came through helping with the down payment. I didn't even ask." I froze. "They paid for this?" "Not all of it," she said quickly. "Just some." I stared at her. She didn't notice. Or maybe she didn't care. Back inside, Mom offered me tea like nothing had just happened. I declined. "You've always been the responsible one, Claire," she said, almost wistfully. I remembered when she used to say that with pride. Today, it sounded like an excuse. When I left that afternoon, I stood on the sidewalk and looked at the BMW again. Sleek, silent, expensive. I looked at my mother's nervous smile as she waved from the door. And for the first time, I asked myself, where exactly did that money come from? The bank manager took off his glasses and said the words I'll never forget. "Ms. Wilson, your trust account holds $3,782. I sat across from Mr. Jenkins in a wood-paneled office that smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. My hands were clasped tightly in my lap, knuckles white. I had walked in with quiet hope and a touch of anxiety. Now I felt the ground tilt beneath me. 3,000. What? I asked, my voice paper-thin. Mr. Jenkins didn't flinch. He folded his glasses and set them gently on the desk. $3,782.14, to be precise. That is the current balance of your educational trust fund. There was a long silence, the kind that swallows noise and thought alike. "That can't be right," I whispered. "There should be over 100,000. I've barely touched it. I've been working part-time through college. I only pulled for 2 semesters and a laptop." He gave a slow, professional nod. "According to our records, the account has experienced significant withdrawals over the past 2 years. He turned the monitor toward me. A spreadsheet glowed on the screen. Row after row of transactions, each date a punch to the chest. $15,000, $25,000, $40,000. Again and again. All of these were authorized by the co-trustees, Thomas and Patricia Wilson. he added, reading the names with mechanical precision. My heart skipped, then crashed. My father, my mother. My eyes scanned the withdrawal notes, most of them blank, a few labeled approved disbursement. No mention of Columbia, no tuition receipts. Mr. Jenkins tapped one line. This transfer here, $25,000, matches the purchase date for a luxury vehicle registered to your sister. We see another $40,000 transferred shortly before a lease was signed on a Chelsea apartment. I blinked hard, willing myself not to cry. The trust was for my education. It was Grandma's gift. He gave a small, solemn nod. Yes, Ms. Evelyn Wilson was very specific. The trust was set up for post-secondary education, graduate school expenses primarily. I forced myself to swallow the growing lump in my throat. So how could this happen? Your parents, as co-trustees, have management privileges until you turn 30, but... He leaned forward slightly. There are stipulations. The trust language is clear. Funds must be used for educational purposes. Personal withdrawals, like the ones we're seeing here, may constitute a violation. A sliver of clarity cut through the fog in my head. So, it's not just wrong. It's potentially illegal. His hesitation confirmed more than any answer. It depends on how aggressively it's pursued. There is a clause in the trust that may allow for recovery under certain circumstances. A clawback clause. I would need time to review it fully. I nodded, though I barely understood. My ears were ringing. My eyes fixed again on the screen. The numbers stared back like accusations, cold and unfeeling. They drained it. Mom and Dad. They looked me in the eyes over dinner and told me everything was fine. And all this time, I stood up too quickly, the chair scraping against the hardwood. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. I need to think. I understand. He reached for a folder. Take this with you. It includes a printout of the transaction history and a copy of the most recent trust statement. I took it with trembling fingers, mumbled a thank you, and left. The spring sunlight outside felt obscene. Too bright. Too warm. I walked blindly to my car, barely aware of the people around me. I got in, shut the door, and stared down at the papers in my lap. I flipped through them once, twice, until I couldn't take it anymore. My grandmother's name on the original trust, the drained amounts, the dates that matched Emily's rise to a new life I hadn't questioned nearly enough. My eyes burned, but the tears wouldn't fall. I sat in my car, staring at the transaction history in my hands, and realized I was going to war with my own family. I showed up uninvited, holding a folder of bank statements and a heart full of rage. The sun was dipping behind the trees when I parked across from my parents' house. From the outside, it looked like nothing had changed. The curtains still matched the pale shutters. The same wind chime clinked gently on the porch. But I wasn't the same. I walked up the steps, my fingers tightening around the manila folder. I hadn't called ahead. I didn't need to. It was Sunday. Laughter drifted through the windows as I rang the doorbell. It took a few seconds before Mom opened it, her expression turning from surprise to concern in a heartbeat. "Claire, we weren't expecting you." "Yeah," I said flatly. "I figured." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in, sweetheart. We're just about to serve dinner." I stepped into the warm kitchen glow. Dad was pouring wine. Emily was flipping through napkin swatches with Jordan, who grinned like a man who'd never had a single consequence land on his doorstep. Emily glanced up and squealed. "You're here, finally. I was just showing them the floral options. Look." She held up a printout of blush peonies arranged in gold vases. Classy but not try hard, right? I forced a nod. Beautiful. We all moved to the dining room. The roast chicken smelled like memory. Rosemary and garlic, crisp skin, warmth. But it didn't touch me. I sat down across from my father, directly beside Emily. "Claire?" Mom said gently, passing the salad. "How was your week?" I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. "Eye-opening," I said. So I went to the bank. The air shifted. Dad's hand froze around his wine glass. Jordan looked at Emily, who paused mid-sip. Only Mom responded. Oh? I laid the folder on the table and slid it toward them. You said we'd talk about the trust fund. I got tired of waiting. Dad cleared his throat. Claire, this is a family dinner. Exactly, I said, which makes it the perfect time to talk about how you drained my educational trust to fund my sister's luxury engagement. Mom reached for the folder, flipping it open with trembling hands. Claire, it's complicated. No, I snapped. It's not. Emily frowned. I didn't know where the money came from. I thought it was just a gift. Seriously? I turned to her. You didn't think it was weird that you got a $25,000 ring and a brand new BMW while I was applying for financial aid? Jordan leaned forward, his voice smooth. Look, Claire, I get that you're upset. But once my company launches, we can try to help. I don't want your startup charity, I said, eyes narrowing. I want the money Grandma left for me to get an education. That was the plan. Dad finally spoke. Claire, you're blowing this out of proportion. These things happen in families. Money moves around. Number. You moved it, I said. Without telling me. Without my consent. Mom looked at me with sad eyes. You've always been so independent. We thought, maybe you'd defer for a year. Work a little. Save up. I stared at her, numb. You want me to take a gap year because you spent my tuition on a vineyard deposit and leather seat upgrades? Nobody spoke. The air was so thick I could barely breathe. I stood up slowly. You had no right, I said. And I'm not just going to let this go. Your grandmother anticipated this, Mr. Jenkins said. She left you a way out. I sat in the same leather chair I'd collapsed into just days before. Only this time I was upright, alert. The air in Mr. Jenkins' office was cool and clean, but the tension between us crackled like an exposed wire. He slid a thick folder across the polished mahogany desk. I've reviewed the full trust documentation, including appendices your parents may not have bothered to read, he said, removing his glasses and pinching the bridge of his nose. Your grandmother was a shrewd woman. She built this trust with foresight most people don't expect from family. I opened the folder. Inside were stamped pages, legal annotations, and handwritten amendments in familiar cursive. She set rules? I asked, my voice low. Very specific ones, he said. Claire, this was an educational trust. The funds were restricted to tuition, academic housing, required materials, nothing more. Your parents, as co-trustees, were permitted to manage disbursements, but only within that framework. He leaned forward. There's more. She required annual audits by a third party. Those audits were missed the last 3 years. My heart began to race. And then there's this. He tapped a paper near the back. The clawback clause. If funds are used for non-educational purposes, the bank has a fiduciary duty to recover them. I looked up. Recover how? Via legal means if necessary. And, he paused. In such a breach, control of the trust can be transferred immediately to the beneficiary. That would be you. It was all there. Signed, notarized, airtight. I blinked, letting the weight of it settle. So what happens now? He folded his hands. That depends on you. I'm required to inform our legal department if you want us to proceed. They'll initiate recovery. There will be formal letters, likely a settlement request, possibly a lawsuit. I exhaled slowly. They'll never speak to me again. Perhaps, he said gently. But that's their decision, not yours. Silence hung heavy between us. My eyes scanned the clauses again. I saw my grandmother's careful ink. I remembered her voice in that sunlit kitchen. Don't ever let people guilt you out of what's rightfully yours, Claire. They stole from me, I said quietly. From her. He nodded once. I closed the folder and met his eyes. What's the next step if I say yes? I'll have our legal liaison contact you. Likely tomorrow. I swallowed hard. Do it. He reached for his phone, then hesitated. One last time, Claire. Are you sure? I stood, the answer already pulsing in my chest. I want them to pay it all back, I said. And I want to make sure they never do this to anyone else again. Her name was Rebecca Chen, and she didn't flinch when I told her I was planning to sue my own parents. Her office was spare but elegant, light wood, soft gray walls, not a single photograph in sight. Everything about it suggested discretion, precision, boundaries. She gestured for me to sit and slid a legal pad to the center of her desk. The sound of my chair scraping the floor felt deafening in the silence. You spoke to Richard Jenkins? She began, flipping open a folder. Yes, I said, my fingers gripping my tote strap. He said you specialize in trust litigation. I do, and he says you have a very strong case. Her tone wasn't dramatic, just measured, exacting. She was maybe mid-30s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense hair pulled back in a low bun. Her calm unnerved me more than outrage might have. I told her everything. The trust Grandma Evelyn set up, the withdrawals I never authorized, the car, the wedding, the dismissiveness, my parents' evasion, my sister's clueless entitlement. I stopped only once, when my throat locked at the memory of my grandmother's letter. Rebecca said nothing until I finished. Then, she clicked her pen once. This, she said, tapping the folder, is textbook fiduciary violation. Your parents used restricted funds for non-approved purposes. It's not just morally wrong. It's legally actionable. This isn't a gray area, Claire. It's financial abuse. I exhaled. Not relief, but something close. So what happens now? She outlined it clinically. First, the bank would issue a formal notice of trust violation to my parents. They would have 30 days to repay the full amount or face legal action. If they refused, we'd proceed to court. Civil litigation seeking full restitution, interest, and legal fees. The bank would be the initiating party, but I, as beneficiary, would be central. And what happens to them? If they comply, quiet repayment, no further damage. If not, their credit, assets, and reputation could be affected, especially if it escalates publicly. The words settled between us, sharp and weighty. And me? I asked. You'll be called selfish, cold, unforgiving. They may rally relatives, use guilt, threaten to cut ties. I swallowed. They already have. She leaned forward slightly. Claire, I'm your attorney, but I'm also a woman who's seen too many people give up justice to keep toxic peace. If you move forward, I'll protect you, legally and emotionally, as much as I can. I stared at the window behind her, where twilight had started softening the skyline. Grandma's voice echoed in my head. You fight for what's right, even when it's lonely. I nodded. Send the letter. Rebecca's eyes didn't waver. She opened a drawer and pulled out a form. Sign here to authorize me. I'll have it drafted by morning. The pen felt heavier than I expected. As I stood to leave, she looked me square in the face. They're going to come for you now, she said. Be ready. The letter from the bank arrived on a Wednesday, right between Emily's wedding menu and Mom's Pilates appointment. I didn't even have to see it delivered to know it landed. The signs came fast. First, a single-word text from my father at 8:47 a.m. Claire. Then a series of escalating messages from my mother. 9:12 a.m. I just got a letter from the bank. What is this, Claire? 9:14 a.m. I can't believe you would do this to your own family. 9:17 a.m. You're tearing us apart. By the time I sat down with my coffee, Emily's name lit up my phone, her contact photo a filtered selfie with 2 white teeth and a forced laugh. I let it go to voicemail. She called again, and again. Finally, I picked up. You've lost your mind, she snapped without saying hello. You're suing Mom and Dad? Over money? It's not money, Emily, I said. It's my education. It's the trust Grandma left for me. Oh my God, Claire, are you serious? You're going to ruin everything. Your wedding is funded by stolen money. The silence on the line stretched. That's not fair, she said finally. I didn't ask for them to give it to me. But you didn't say no either. You know what? Don't come. Don't show up to the wedding. You'll just ruin the mood. I ended the call without responding. A minute later, Jordan texted, Hey Claire, I know things are messy right now. Maybe we can talk soon? Emily's really upset. I just want peace. I forwarded the whole exchange to Rebecca, who replied, Keep everything. We'll document it all. By mid-afternoon, my phone was a battlefield. Dad called twice. Both went to voicemail. On the second one, his voice was ice. If you continue this course of action, Claire, consider yourself no longer part of this family. The words sat on my chest like a stone. But it wasn't until the third voicemail, this one from my mother, that my hands began to tremble. Your father's heart can't handle this, she said, voice cracking. If anything happens to him, it's on you. I put the phone down and stared at the ceiling, bile rising in my throat. The walls of my tiny apartment felt like they were closing in, the air too thick. My email pinged. Subject line, Meredith Callahan. Urgent. Aunt Meredith, my mother's older sister. Claire, I know things are tense. I just got off the phone with your mother. I'd like to hear your side of this before I make any judgments. Can we talk? I blinked, rereading it. The first voice that wasn't attacking. That didn't demand an apology. I didn't reply right away. But for the first time that day, I didn't feel completely alone. They didn't just steal my money. They rewrote who I was in this family. I sat alone in the half-light of my apartment, the only sound the soft whir of my space heater. Outside, snow collected on the window ledge like forgotten promises. My eyes burned from hours of reading and rereading emails, legal documents, old letters. And yet it was a single sentence that refused to leave my mind. You've always been so responsible, Claire. It wasn't a compliment. It never had been. I remembered saying that to Dr. Ramirez during our first session, months after Grandma Evelyn passed. I had walked into her office numb, heavy with grief, carrying more weight than I could articulate. She called me the strong one, I had told her, picking at the sleeve of my cardigan. I thought it meant I was reliable. But now, it feels like it was just an excuse to give me less. Dr. Ramirez had tilted her head gently. That's a common dynamic in dysfunctional families. Assigning roles. There's often a golden child, and there's often someone else left to carry the burden when things get hard. I stared at her. You think I'm the scapegoat? I think you're the one they knew would survive the neglect. The words landed harder than I expected. I hadn't cried then. I had just nodded and swallowed a truth I didn't want but couldn't deny. Tonight, I reopened the letter from Grandma Evelyn. The pages were soft at the edges from so much handling. Her handwriting was steady, elegant. You are not selfish for wanting what's yours. Do not let anyone redefine your worth based on what they need from you. As I read, a quiet fury began to bloom. This fight wasn't just about Columbia or tuition. It wasn't about dollar signs and contracts. It was about being erased. I had spent years shrinking to fit the outline they left me. Responsible, dependable, quiet. But they had never seen me. Not really. I was the background to Emily's spotlight, the audience to her performance. And now, they had tried to write me out entirely. I reached for a box in the back of my closet, old photo albums and scrapbooks. My fingers trembled as I flipped through until I found it. A picture from Emily's 10th birthday. She stood in the center, beaming, surrounded by balloons and friends. In the far corner of the frame, almost cropped out, was me. Holding a tray of cupcakes, half smiling, I stared at it for a long time. Then I walked into the kitchen, struck a match, and watched it burn slowly in the sink. When the edges curled and blackened, I felt something unclench in my chest. Later, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and clicked New Post. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. What if I told you your family wasn't just toxic? They were thieves. I hit save, not post, not yet. But the words were out, living somewhere beyond my head. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was reclaiming. They want to repay $20,000 and call it even, Rebecca said. It's insulting. The words hit me harder than I expected. Not because I was surprised, because I wasn't, but because of how unsurprised I was. I sat across from her at the long mahogany table in her office, staring at the neat folder she'd just slid toward me. Legal language, formal apologies to the bank, but none to me. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just a check for a fraction of what they had stolen. They think this is going away, I muttered, flipping the first page. They think I'll back off if they throw some crumbs. They're testing your resolve, Rebecca said flatly. Classic strategy. Offer something that looks conciliatory on the surface, but is really just a way to avoid full accountability. I could see it all so clearly now. The fake concern, the dodged phone calls, the desperate shift to emotional guilt once the legal gears started turning. It had never been about understanding what they'd done to me. It was about controlling the narrative. They're hoping I'll feel bad, I said, that I'll want peace more than justice. Do you? I looked up sharply. She wasn't challenging me, just asking, point blank. And I remembered Emily's brand new white BMW, the $25,000 ring she flaunted like a trophy, the Manhattan apartment with a doorman, the cake tasting in the Hamptons, all funded by money meant for Columbia, for me. No, I said. I don't want peace. I want consequences. Rebecca nodded once, satisfied. The bank's legal department is prepared to act. If you approve escalation, they'll freeze the accounts used to misappropriate the trust funds. I didn't hesitate. Do it. She pulled a fresh set of documents from her briefcase. This authorizes us to initiate asset protection and formal recovery proceedings. Once you sign, we move forward with full legal weight. I took the pen in hand. For a second, I stared at the line where my signature would go. It felt like a cliff, stepping off the edge of everything I used to believe about family. And then I signed. Rebecca smiled grimly, sliding the documents back into their folder. You just moved from defense to offense. I exhaled, the knot in my chest easing just slightly. Let the game begin. Aunt Meredith showed up with two things: an old photo album and the truth. Her townhouse smelled like cinnamon and pine cleaner. Warm, familiar, lived in. It was the kind of house where people still kept framed photographs on end tables instead of scrolling through memories on phones. I hadn't been there in years, not since a Thanksgiving before everything fractured. But now, as I stood on her welcome mat, her arms already outstretched, I realized how much I needed this. Come in, sweetheart, she said. I made mulled wine, and I pulled something from the attic I think you'll want to see. I followed her into the cozy living room where a fire flickered softly and a large leather-bound photo album sat on the coffee table. Meredith looked older than I remembered, but her eyes were sharper, more perceptive. There was no small talk, no tiptoeing. I got your message, she said, pouring 2 glasses of wine. And I got the letter from the bank, too. Your mother's been vocal about it. I gave a small, bitter smile. Let me guess. She thinks I'm destroying the family. She's not wrong, Meredith said, then added, but the part she never sees is the family was already rotting from the inside. She passed me the wine and sat beside me, flipping open the photo album. Pictures of my mom and Meredith as teenagers, then young adults. Summer vacations, birthdays, college send-offs. She was always the golden girl, Meredith said softly, tapping a photo of Patricia in a prom dress, beaming like she owned the world. Our parents thought she hung the moon. I was the backup daughter. I blinked. It echoed too closely to what I'd been feeling. You were Claire before Claire. She nodded. I know what it's like to be invisible, to be expected to be fine with less because you're the strong one. That's why I called you after the letter. Not just because I believe you, but because I lived it. My throat tightened. Why didn't you ever say anything? I tried, she said. To Evelyn, mostly. Your grandmother and I had more in common than people realized. She saw through your father early on. She told me once, Thomas has ambition, but not enough integrity to match it. That caught my breath. She said that? Meredith reached into a side drawer and pulled out a small flash drive. She kept records, emails with the bank, her attorney, even handwritten notes about the trust. I made copies after she passed. I didn't know why at the time. Now I do. My hands trembled as I took the flash drive. She wanted to protect you, Claire. She tried to build something foolproof. But I think she also knew if anything went wrong, it would be you who noticed. You who'd fight. I swallowed hard, the weight of that responsibility folding into my chest like bricks. She once said, Meredith continued, if Thomas ever touches these funds for anything other than Claire's education, you call me. I stared at her. She wrote that? Meredith nodded. In an email, dated 3 years before she passed. I flagged it in the files. The room blurred for a moment, not from tears, but from the sheer vindication of being believed, being seen. I pocketed the drive carefully. Thank you. I don't know what to say. Say you'll finish what she started, Meredith said, her tone firm but warm. Say you'll win. I stood to leave, clutching the flash drive like a lifeline. Meredith walked me to the door, and just before I stepped outside, she said, Claire, I think Grandma left a backup plan. You just have to find it. I didn't name names, but everyone knew exactly who I was meant to be. The cursor blinked at the bottom of the screen, waiting for me to click post. My fingers hovered, frozen in midair. I'd rewritten the final sentence 3 times. I didn't know if it was brave or reckless. Maybe it was both. When Family Steals Your Future. That was the title. Simple, blunt. Underneath it, 5 paragraphs that stripped me raw without ever naming a soul. I described a girl who had worked 2 jobs through undergrad, who had been promised a future through her grandmother's trust. I wrote about the betrayal, not with bitterness, but with clarity. How her parents diverted that money to fund luxury and image for someone else. How she had to choose between silence and self-respect. I included no dates, no locations, just pain, truth, and the line. This story isn't rare, but the silence around it is. I hit post. The screen flashed once, then nothing. Just the quiet hum of my laptop fan and the soft rain tapping against my window. I closed the lid, stood and paced the apartment like a caged animal. My phone buzzed once, then again, then constantly. Notifications, likes, comments, shares. I opened my laptop again, this time to Twitter. My post had been retweeted 312 times in the first 20 minutes. By the hour mark, it was over 1,000. Someone had screenshotted it to Reddit. My anonymous Medium post was now on the front page of r/trueoffmychest. Claire? A text from Ethan, Rebecca's assistant, popped up. Is this you? Because if it is, your story's gone viral. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Hundreds of strangers were commenting. I went through this too. My dad stole my college fund. This is why I don't trust family with money. Blood isn't always love. Please sue them. You're not alone. I scrolled until I couldn't keep up. My inbox chimed. First 1 message from a local journalist, then 3. By the time I checked email, there were over 20 unread messages. One stood out. Subject: Columbia. We're with you, Claire. This is Professor Tanaka from the Ed Psych department. I saw your story. You don't have to explain. We're holding your spot in the cohort. Just let us know when you're ready. Tears welled in my eyes. This time not from anger or betrayal, but from something gentler. Something like hope. Just as I was about to log off for the night, one final notification lit up. I know who this is. Your sister isn't who she says she is. I stared at the comment, heart suddenly pounding again. I clicked the user profile. Anonymous, no posts, no history. But something about the way it was phrased. The words echoed in my mind like thunder. Your sister isn't who she says she is. And just like that, the story cracked open in an entirely new direction. They thought a Sunday roast could fix what betrayal had broken. The Wilson dining room looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine. Perfectly set table, linen napkins folded into triangles, roast chicken glistening under a chandelier's glow. But there was a hollowness in the air that no amount of wine or pot roast could fill. Claire's chair sat conspicuously empty. Emily twirled her fork through the mashed potatoes, her smile fixed and eyes hard. She's unraveling, she said to no one in particular, posting vague things online like some victim. Honestly, I think she needs help. Oh, Patricia didn't meet her daughter's eyes. Maybe we shouldn't talk about this over dinner. Oh, please, Emily snapped. It's already out there. You think people don't know it's me? Across the table, Jordan shifted uncomfortably, his arm half raised as if to say something, then lowered it again. His father, Charles, a heavy-set man with a steel-gray buzz cut and a voice like gravel, cleared his throat. I read the post, Charles said flatly. Didn't say any names, but anyone with half a brain can follow the breadcrumbs. Emily's smile faltered. It's exaggerated. Claire always had a flair for drama. And Grandma, she put too much pressure on her. Made her think she was some golden child. Thomas shot Emily a look. That's enough. No, I want to understand. Charles interjected. The trust was earmarked for Claire's education, right? Thomas straightened in his seat. We had discretion. As co-trustees, we could reallocate the funds where needed. Reallocate, Charles repeated. To your other daughter's luxury car, high-rise apartment, and destination wedding? Silence thudded into the room like a dropped plate. Let's not exaggerate. Patricia started, but Jordan interrupted. Dad has a point, he said quietly. What happens if the IRS starts poking around? If this goes to court? Patricia stood up abruptly. This was supposed to be a celebration, she snapped. Do you all think we're criminals? We were helping our daughter. Claire was always so independent. She never needed... Her voice cracked. She was just supposed to say thank you, Patricia whispered. Then she broke. Plates clattered as she pushed past the kitchen door, a choked sob following behind. Emily leaned back, arms crossed tightly over her chest. You didn't warn me it would get this messy. She hissed at her father. You told me it would blow over. Jordan didn't look at her. He was staring at the wine glass in front of him as if trying to find the right words. My dad's out, he said finally. He's pulling the wedding support, says we're too exposed. Emily's eyes blazed. What? He won't risk it, Jordan continued, not with potential legal action on the table. The silence after that was thick. No one chewed, no one spoke. Emily pushed her chair back slowly, deliberately. She stood, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood. She looked directly at her father, then her mother still sobbing in the kitchen. Fix this, she said coldly. Or I will. They wanted silence. I gave them a subpoena. The conference room at Rebecca Chen's law office was clean and quiet, like the surface of a pond seconds before a stone shatters its peace. Claire sat at the far end of the long table, a slim flash drive clutched in her palm like a grenade she was about to pull the pin on. Rebecca reached for it with calm, practiced fingers. This is from your aunt? Claire nodded. And I've read the emails. Grandma Evelyn was very clear. If the funds were misused, we trigger the clawback provision, Rebecca finished, and the court can shift control of the trust immediately. Ethan, seated beside his laptop, typed without looking up. Backing this with the original wording from the trust will be airtight. Grandma Evelyn didn't play games. Claire exhaled, watching the flash drive disappear into the USB port like a weapon being loaded. Rebecca scanned the documents on screen, nodding to herself. Okay, let's break it down for the filing. She ticked each point on her fingers. 1. The trust's language explicitly defines usage, education only. 2. Your parents diverted over $100,000 for non-educational purposes. 3. They failed to conduct mandatory annual audits, which is another breach. And 4. She turned the laptop toward Claire. Evelyn's direct email to the bank in 2019. If Thomas ever touches these funds for anything other than Claire's education, you call me immediately. That's damning. Claire stared at the sentence, Evelyn's voice echoing in her mind. The certainty, the love, the absolute clarity. Rebecca's tone softened. This isn't just about recovery. It's about intent. That email proves Evelyn anticipated this betrayal and tried to prevent it. Then let's do it, Claire said. File it. By noon, the petition was signed, stapled, and placed in a thick envelope. Claire watched as Ethan walked it down the courthouse hallway, his footsteps echoing off the marble like the countdown to impact. They had crossed the threshold. There was no going back. Back in the office, Rebecca closed her laptop. Now that it's public, their mask will fall fast. Get ready. Claire managed a tight smile. I already burned the old photos. She left the office and walked into the crisp afternoon light, phone tucked into her coat pocket, inbox buzzing with alerts. One stood out. A new message from Emily. No subject line. Just one sentence. I hope you're ready to burn everything down. They always thought I was the weak one. Quiet, obedient. They never thought I'd go this far. Claire sipped lukewarm coffee at her kitchen table, eyes flicking across the screen. Her Reddit post had gone viral again. Someone had shared it to a law student subreddit. Another thread debated the ethics of trust fund manipulation, but what caught her breath wasn't the legal chatter. It was the new comment. She said the BMW was a gift, but I remember Emily cried in the kitchen and begged Patricia to just use Claire's trust fund. She won't even know. I was there. I heard it. Posted anonymously, but the tone was eerily specific. Claire blinked hard, rereading it 3 times. Another comment below it linked to an old Instagram story from 2 years ago. A flashy boomerang of Emily holding up car keys with the caption, "Thanks, Mom and Dad?" A flood of angry reactions had now overtaken the comments. Jordan's office in Midtown wasn't exactly high-rise, but it was legitimate enough for image. And today, the image was cracking. You knew this might trigger an audit, right? He asked, voice low but clipped. Emily, seated across from him with arms folded, rolled her eyes. We're not criminals, Jordan. It's family money. That's not what the IRS thinks, he said, tossing a manila envelope on the desk. They've flagged your parents' joint account and your transfers from it. Emily's jaw tightened. This is Claire's fault. Jordan looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Is it? Or did you know the trust wasn't supposed to be touched? She stood abruptly. You're really taking her side? I'm taking the side of not going to federal court for fraud. That evening, Claire scrolled through her messages and found another surprise. A name she hadn't seen in years. Ms. Donovan, their former nanny. The text read, I'm not sure if this matters, but I found an old diary Evelyn gave me to write notes in. She once told me, if they ever hurt Claire for loving school, you remind her that I chose her on purpose. I'll send scans. Claire's fingers trembled as she typed back. Please do. In town, whispers had begun to ripple through the cafes and grocery aisles. Did you hear about the Wilsons? I always thought the older one was too quiet. Well, look who's making noise now. Emily opened her phone in the middle of the night to find her DMs filled with accusatory messages, unfollows, and someone tagging her in the Reddit thread. Her thumbs shook. She started blocking accounts, one after another. But the flow didn't stop. It felt like water seeping through walls she thought were solid. She slammed her phone face down on her dresser. From the hallway, Jordan watched silently as she let out a guttural yell and hurled it against the mirror. The glass cracked like lightning. This was never supposed to be Claire's story. They invited me to talk. I came to make them listen. The Wilson living room looked the same, but everything about it felt colder. The fire crackled half-heartedly in the hearth, casting flickers of gold against the family portraits. Photos Claire no longer saw as memories, but as myths. Her mother had arranged the chairs in a semicircle, as if staging a reconciliation. Her father nursed a glass of scotch. Emily sat rigidly on the armrest, arms folded, face unreadable. Claire didn't sit. She placed a folder on the coffee table with quiet precision. "This isn't a negotiation," she said. "It's a notification." Patricia flinched like the words had slapped her. Thomas gave a tight smile. "Let's try to keep this civil." Claire opened the folder and removed a single sheet. It was printed in crisp black ink. Grandma Evelyn wrote this in an email to her trust officer. "No one who betrays blood will prosper." The quote hung heavy in the room. "You think this is about money?" Claire's voice didn't rise, but the air seemed to still. "It's about trust, about respect, about a promise made to a granddaughter who stayed up all night studying while her sister flew to Greece." Thomas shifted. "Claire, Evelyn never understood the financial complexity of—" She understood enough to write clauses, legal ones, with names, dates, triggers. Claire's hand hovered over the folder. "And instructions to have both of you removed as trustees if abuse was found." Patricia choked back something. Grief or guilt, Claire couldn't tell. "Sweetheart, we didn't mean harm. We thought you'd understand eventually. Family helps family." Claire's jaw tightened. "Then why the secrecy? Why the lies?" Thomas stood. "We raised you, fed you, clothed you. With money that wasn't yours," she snapped. "You raised me to be strong. So I'm standing here now, telling you. The lawsuit has been filed. There will be court. There will be audits. There will be questions you'll have to answer. Under oath." The silence that followed was profound. Patricia crumpled slightly into her chair. Thomas stared at the fire. Then Emily rose, walking slowly toward her sister. Her tone was almost gentle. "You want more, Claire?" Her lips curled, eyes gleaming with something venomous. "You got it. They spent years ignoring consequences. Now they have a court date." Claire stared at the email subject line. "Hearing notice. March 17th, 10 a.m. Her heart thudded against her ribs, not out of fear, but something more powerful. Finality. She picked up the phone. "Rebecca?" "It's official," her attorney said. "You'll be in courtroom 3B. I've already submitted the finalized petition, bank statements, Evelyn's handwritten amendment, and the audit flags." Claire let out a slow breath. "Then let's do this." Rebecca's tone softened. "You've come farther than most people ever dare, Claire. This is the final stretch." That afternoon, Claire signed the last of the legal paperwork from her apartment, hand steady as she scrolled through PDF after PDF. She uploaded Evelyn's scanned clause. "If my co-trustees abuse this fund, I authorize full transfer of control to my granddaughter, Claire Whitmore." The ink had faded, but the intention was fireproof. Across town, Patricia Wilson stood at her kitchen counter, fingers trembling as she opened the thick envelope delivered by certified mail. Her breath hitched. "Thomas," she whispered. He was halfway through pouring scotch when he glanced up. "What now?" She held out the papers with shaking hands. She really did it. He grabbed them, eyes darting over the bolded lines. Notice of hearing. Petition for trustee removal. Fraudulent use of educational trust. His face flushed red. "That ungrateful girl," he muttered. "We gave her everything." Patricia collapsed onto the bar stool. "We just needed to help Emily. Claire was always fine." Thomas slammed the glass on the counter, scotch sloshing over the rim. "And now we're going to court." That evening, Claire took a quiet cab ride to Greenlawn Cemetery. She stood before Grandma Evelyn's modest gravestone, tucked beneath a bare-limbed tree, the wind biting through her coat. I filed it, she said softly, kneeling beside the headstone. They'll sit in front of a judge and answer for everything. The cemetery was quiet, save for the rustle of dry leaves scraping across the ground. You protected me even in death. Her phone buzzed as she stood to leave. Unknown number. Claire hesitated, then answered. Claire, came her mother's voice, already thick with tears. Please, if you do this, you'll destroy us. There was a time those words would have broken her. But now? Claire's voice was ice. You already did. When lies rot long enough, they start to smell, even to the ones who believed them. Emily adjusted her pearl drop earring, tilting her head just so in the mirror of the bridal salon. The silk veil trailed behind her as she turned slightly on the platform. Around her, bridesmaids murmured affirmations until one of their phones pinged. Then another. Is it true your sister's suing your family? Someone whispered, barely loud enough to cut through the background of faint classical music and tulle rustling. Emily stiffened, mimosa halfway to her lips. Excuse me? Amber, one of her college friends, held out her phone. An anonymous Reddit post had gone viral. Again. Only now it had names, or at least initials that no one in their social circle could mistake. I thought it was some clickbait, Amber said, but it sounds like your family. Emily forced a tight smile. People will say anything for attention. But her fingers gripped the flute too hard. Claire hadn't responded to her DMS, not to the email, not even the voice message she'd left at midnight the night before. Vendors had begun dropping out. Her florist's assistant left a voicemail. Due to the legal hold on the Wilson account, we can't fulfill the contract at this time. Her makeup artist asked for a 50% deposit in cash, upfront. That morning, Claire's public post had hit 1 million views. In the scrolling comment section, Emily saw her own filtered selfies reposted with captions like, "This car bought with stolen tuition." A high school acquaintance had added, "I remember how she treated the rest of us. Karma Emily had tried to get ahead of it." She posted a photo of her and Jordan in a vineyard from last fall, captioned, "Peace in the storm." But the comments spiraled into a war zone. Pay your sister back. You're not the victim. Still, she clung to her timeline, her aesthetic, her illusion, until the dress fitting. She arrived with her maid of honor in tow, hoping for a moment of reprieve. The boutique manager looked pale. "Miss Wilson, I'm afraid there's an issue." "What kind of issue?" "The payment didn't clear last week, and due to the active court proceeding, we've been advised to halt all services." Emily's eyes flicked to the glass case where her dream gown, $7,200 of imported lace and hand beading should have been. It was gone. "You're repossessing my dress?" she hissed. The assistant winced. "It's already been picked up by the manufacturer. I'm truly sorry." Emily turned toward the mirror, the pale pink walls spinning around her. For a moment, the reflection was unfamiliar. Lips parted, foundation cracking near her temples, breath uneven. She braced herself on the wall. "She's destroying everything," she whispered. It wasn't just about proving the theft. It was about showing the intent behind it. Claire sat across from Rebecca in the quiet of the law office's glass conference room, a stack of folders between them like a battlefield of proof. The late winter light filtered in through frosted panes, catching the edges of embossed legal documents, flash drives, and notepads scribbled with timelines. "This," Rebecca said, tapping the top folder, "isn't just a paper trail. It's a story, one the court won't be able to ignore." Claire swallowed hard, her fingers brushing a black USB drive labeled Evelyn Wilson voicemail, final.mp3. She hadn't listened to it yet. Not fully. She couldn't. But Rebecca had. "You ready?" Rebecca asked gently, handing her the headphones. Claire hesitated. Then she slid them over her ears and hit play. Evelyn's voice crackled to life. Aged, tired, but steady as ever. "If anything happens, protect Claire. That money is hers. She'll need it to stand on her own, and I won't be around to shield her. If Thomas touches a penny, you take it back. Claire blinked rapidly, fighting the lump forming in her throat. Rebecca didn't say anything. She just gave her the space to feel it. They moved on, reviewing Aunt Meredith's affidavit next. 3 pages detailing decades of family favoritism, Thomas's financial irresponsibility, and a poignant moment. Evelyn pulling her aside at Thanksgiving and whispering, "I don't trust Patricia or Thomas with Claire's future. That's why I left instructions." Rebecca leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against her notebook. "You see what this does?" Claire nodded slowly. "It proves they didn't just misuse the money. They knew they weren't supposed to." "Exactly. This makes it not just theft, but betrayal. Malicious intent." The last document was a compiled spreadsheet, color-coded. Green for legitimate educational expenses, red for every personal withdrawal. It was almost entirely red. Rebecca slid over the final motion. "Motion to seize assets pending full trial." She read. Attached: Evelyn's recording, email chain, Meredith's affidavit, bank breakdown. Claire stared at the signature line. Her name. Just one stroke of a pen and everything would move forward. No more theory, no more doubt. She took the pen and signed. "Let's finish this." They walked into the courtroom like they still owned the story. They were wrong. Claire stood near the front of the small but sterile courtroom, the fluorescent lights humming above her like some unseen jury. Her heart pounded steady and slow. This was no longer about revenge. It was about clarity, about finality. Thomas and Patricia walked in behind their attorney, Patricia in a pale blue coat that looked almost too soft for what she was here to defend. Thomas wore a dark suit that couldn't quite cover the nervous twitch in his jaw. They didn't look at Claire. They looked at the judge, at the floor, at nothing. Rebecca stood beside Claire, calm as ever. Her file was thick, her tabs color-coded, her eyes razor-sharp. Judge Harper, an older woman with a no-nonsense tone and wire-rimmed glasses, called the hearing to order. Rebecca stepped forward first. "Your Honor, the plaintiff presents conclusive documentation that the trust funds allocated exclusively for educational purposes were knowingly diverted to personal luxury expenses, vehicles, real estate deposits, and private event planning. We also present a recorded message from the late Evelyn Whitmore, the trust's originator, explicitly stating her intentions." She played the audio. "If anything happens, protect Claire. That money is hers." The courtroom stilled. Claire didn't blink. Patricia sniffled. "It was never meant to hurt her. We thought we were helping Emily start her life." "Mrs. Whitmore," Judge Harper interrupted, "intentions do not override legal stipulations, especially not when those stipulations were written, signed, and filed by a woman as precise as Evelyn Whitmore." Thomas tried to deflect. Perhaps some financial judgment was misplaced, but mistakes, Rebecca cut in, do not come in the form of 15 sequential withdrawals over 2 years, all aligning with luxury purchases and wedding expenses. Claire didn't speak. She didn't need to. Emily sat in the back row, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes locked on Claire's. She didn't look away. For the first time, Emily wasn't smirking. She wasn't crying. She looked resigned. After reviewing the paperwork one last time, Judge Harper leaned forward, her voice firm. "The court finds that Thomas and Patricia Whitmore violated the legal terms of the Evelyn Whitmore Educational Trust. The total misappropriated funds shall be returned to Claire Whitmore's account in full. Furthermore, the defendants are ordered to bear all legal costs and are hereby removed from any fiduciary control over the trust." Claire exhaled. No tears, no shaking. She turned to face her parents. Her voice was even, clear. "I didn't want to win. I just didn't want to lose myself." Emily was awarded Emerging Artist of the Year. I was promoted to regional lead. Only one of us needed applause. Claire sat quietly in the corner of her old office, her laptop open to a live stream from a sleek Manhattan venue. On the screen, Emily took the stage in a crimson dress, tears in her eyes as she accepted the award. The audience clapped. Cameras flashed. A lifetime ago, Claire might have watched with bitterness, counting the ways her sister had always been chosen. But not tonight. Claire took a sip of her coffee, smiled faintly, and closed the laptop. Ethan knocked twice on her open door, then leaned in with a teasing grin. End of an era? She laughed. Or the start of a better one. He walked in, holding up his phone. You mind if I get one last photo of you here? For the team's memory wall. She nodded. Go for it. As the shutter clicked, Claire looked around the office that had witnessed her most difficult months. The desk where she took Rebecca's first call. The couch where she cried after the hearing date was announced. The windows that once reflected only stress and doubt, now letting in the final blush of golden afternoon light. The boxes by the door were packed. Evelyn's old photo in a brass frame, a bookmarked journal, the flash drive Meredith had handed her. She had carried them like armor. Now they felt like trophies. Her phone buzzed. Emily. I wouldn't be here if you hadn't been so invisible back then. Thank you, Claire stared at the message. It wasn't an apology. Not exactly. But it wasn't an attack either. It was acknowledgement. She typed, paused, then replied, It's okay. I see myself now. She slipped the phone into her bag. The sun had begun its descent, casting long lines of light across the floor. Claire stood, straightened her blazer, and picked up the last box. No one waited at the door. No grand applause. No final confrontation. Just peace. As she walked into her new office down the hall, a space bigger, brighter, built for someone unafraid to take up room, she paused by the window. Outside, the city buzzed, uncaring and endless. The world didn't owe me fairness, but I owed myself peace. They tried to silence her with guilt, drown her in obligation, and rewrite the truth in their favor. But justice, once awakened, does not sleep again. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, it may arrive late, but when it plays, it echoes through generations. Sometimes, reclaiming what was stolen isn't about revenge. It's about remembering who you are when no one else would. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Type 1 if you resonate with this story.